A little bit, yeah. Yeah.
Got you. All right, brother, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Hey, welcome to Control Talk, now your smart business video casting podcast for the week ending May 24th. It's Memorial Day here in the United States, 2020. This is episode 364, where we talk about all things HVAC and smart building controls. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, your co-host of mine, the man, the myth, the legend, the one, the only secret agent man, Kenny Smyers, is back from his secret agent mission. And he's already told me I cannot ask him about this on air because the government would not like it. And I can't even say which government it was that is hiring the services of our secret agent man, Kenny Smyers. Kenny, welcome back to the show, and congratulations on all the great work you did down under, man. How was New Zealand? I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. I'll have to cut that out. How was your week last week?
It was great. Thank you very much. And it was interesting to have some time off and get things done, important things. But yeah, you did a great job. Scott Cochran and Aaron Gorka did a great job. And it was a great show. Of course, everybody in Controltrends world, our community, knows that you're pulling their legs when you tell them about a secret agent. I'm just an average guy from Pittsburgh.
Yeah, that's what James Bond used to say too. But hey, Kenny, before I forget, as you know, part of what we're doing now is we're acknowledging our platinum sponsors from the Controltrends Awards by having them be the sponsor of different episodes. And this week's sponsor is none other than EasyIO, Platinum Plus sponsor EasyIO. And say something about them, and I'll say something about them, and then we'll get on with the show.
Well, when they became our platinum sponsors this week's show, Control Talk Now 364, I went through some history with EasyIO, and I have a picture in my mind, but there's a video. If you go to Controltrends and you type in Paris, EasyIO Paris, you will see Eric come up, and there's an amazing video that we did 5 years ago, 2015, and we were at the EasyIO World Conference, and it was an amazing thing. You predicted that EasyIO in the Renaissance of Paris, we had an analogy going where they had technology that was going to change the industry, and here we are 5 years later. Their technology emerges to the point where they're bought by Johnson Controls, and now they're part of a global entity, and they've got the deep pockets and the resources to really make that an important control contribution to the markets. I remember Mike Marston at that pyramid that we have with the Louvre.
Yeah,
we're standing in front of the Louvre, and there's a new modern pyramid, and we say that the buildings are our common currency, and then we're pointing at this old building 500 years, and we got this new Louvre museum. But the market analogy Mike Marston always used was the pyramid, that you want to get down deep into the pyramid, not the pointy part where everything's are slim, margins are tight, competitions are fierce. Just when you get down into the broad base of that pyramid where there's a lot of market and everybody wins, and all these great control lines that are out there, and some of the new solutions that are coming out there, there's still just an unlimited amount of market if you can get to the right, you got to get the right people, you got to get the right marketing message.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about our metaphor, the Renaissance, and again, Mike Marston and Lim Hood-Chot and the team from EasyIO, started EasyIO. We got involved with them very early on, Kenny. They reached out to us, and we worked together with them, and we covered their global conferences, everything from Madrid to Paris to Amsterdam. So really happy for those guys, and Johnson Controls, I think, made a great purchase there. But if you think about the Renaissance in history, Kenny, it was a time where people began to question the standard norms. The printing press came out, people began to think more freely, right? And we sort of said that EasyIO started with nothing and built a control system. And we've said this on the show before that, the major manufacturers would all probably rethink starting their product lines if they were to start from scratch, because they've got legacy systems they have to support, and they do a great job with that. So the Renaissance is, relooking at how we do things. And I think it was a pretty accurate call. I think we've seen that since the Paris talks, if you will, that the way we're looking at controls and how they're expanding, people are thinking about them differently. So the next period that came about in history was the Enlightenment, and we haven't quite gotten there yet in our evolution of controls, but Kenny and I will make that prediction when we get there, right, brother?
Well, we actually did. I thought you were talking about Edinburgh when we were up there in the Age of Enlightenment. We're standing in front of Adam Smith's statue, and we're talking about how Edinburgh was a second, the intellectual enormosity of that era, that 100 years of Edinburgh gave tremendous rise to the science, technology, arts, literature, economics. It was all in that little small area. But we are transitioning with this renaissance and enlightenment to another major occurrence that has changed the procession of all the great things going forward. COVID-19 was a deflection point that is equal to or more compelling than the renaissance of controls and the enlightenment of controls. I mean, we right now are in a world, Eric, where we have a great guest, and we're going to go in depth on some of the really important aspects of it, some of the great contributions people in our industry have made, and some of the real positive, instances of positive thought that even though it was knocked everybody off their horse, it's ruined a lot of people's businesses. It's been a real ugly thing to deal with. We seem to be coming out of it, and there's steps to take to go from red to yellow to green, and whether you're in Canada or in Pittsburgh or Atlanta, there's been a release from that.
Well, I got to tell you, Kenny, and I've got some personal experience that I'll share after our interview. I definitely want to get to our interview first, where my wife, who's in the medical field, has got a brother who's a research scientist working on this, and with one of the major universities up north, and we got some input from him that hasn't been officially released yet, but I think will be in the next couple of weeks. So I'll share that after we talk to our guest this week. But let's hit it with our guest this week, Kenny Spires. How about introducing him?
Eric, I'd love to. I mean, this guy is, he's special. He's a member of our Controltrends Hall of Fame. He is the president and CEO of the Continental Automated Buildings Association, formerly known as CABA. We have on our show, Control Talk Now 364, Mr. Ron Zimmer. Welcome to the show, Ron.
Welcome, Ron.
Yeah, we're so delighted. I'm so delighted to be a part of your great feature for the industry and so many insights that you share. So glad to be here.
Well, thanks for being on the show, Ron. We're big fans. And for our audience who might not know about CABA, how about tell them just real quick before we get started what CABA does?
Sure. CABA, so we are an international industry association working very specifically in the area of intelligent buildings and connected homes. Now, of course, IoT and all things being connected. But the work of CABA has been around for just over 30 years. We just celebrated our 30th anniversary. We're governed by a very prestigious board of directors, and we have somewhere in the range of 365 current member organizations, large and small, all over the world. And we're very delighted that now we set a record just recently. We're over 30,000 industry professionals that are working with CABA in some fashion.
I mean, 30,000 people in our industry. These aren't 30,000 bakermen, bankers, airline pilots. These are people in the industry that actually have a continuous need to know what's going on, and they look to CABA for a lot of that North Star leadership.
Yeah.
Well, and I think what I really like, Ron, I had a teacher once who said, "In God we trust, and all else get data." And when I think of you guys, I think it's really fact-based stuff. I mean, there's some opinions, but they come out of hardcore data. I mean, you guys are really, I feel, the research arm of our industry.
That's correct. In fact, our organization has. In some respects, not changed over 30 years. We've always were set up as a knowledge industry of gathering the best research, creating a little bit of research. We're not a research house, but we do create some research. We gather from many sources. We have the world's largest collection of research in our members' library and our public library, well over 900 different pieces of research, none more than 3 years old, all peer-reviewed. By our CABA Information Council. So we continually strive to provide the best research and information and context in our industry. So it definitely resonates. And as our industry continues to grow, it's been a pleasure to be, well, as you know, I've been part of CABA for about 22 of those 30 some years. So it's been a pleasure to see the industry grow as it has.
Kenny, where was it that they had all the world's information? Was it Cairo? They had all the world's information, and half of it
Library
got
of
burned
Alexander,
down.
yeah,
Alexandria, yeah. And so I think in our industry, Ron, history is going to show that you were kind of like, your library was kind of like where the storehouse of all the knowledge. So lots of fire protection there, okay? Because we can't
absolutely
have that being burned down.
Yep. Yeah, we can go back to, I always say that in the connected home space, X10, because we store everything, because everything's put into archives. And I always say, if you want to know where any research was done, and when it was first emerging, extend the clapper, we've got it.
Nice,
Cool.
nice. Well, listen, what is your research and what are you hearing? And from a CABA perspective, let's talk about this COVID-19 thing a bit.
Sure. So, and of course, right now the industry is in an unprecedented, I call it the COVID-19 era. So the organization CABA has been focusing our board of directors and the staff and our councils and committees are working very hard to try to bring the best research and information forward to the industry because first of all, we not that long ago faced, I call it the greatest social experiment that many of us will ever go through. And that's when governments all across the world uh, literally forced, companies, industry, businesses to shut down and really work from home for those that could. So where some companies had been embracing that, others have maybe particular some middle management might have resisted that urge to lose control of their employees by having them work at home. This forced everybody into that situation, or many people into that situation. And we've learned a lot in that period of time. Now we're moving into a phase of where states, provinces, countries are moving to reopen and to then move employees back. So now that's a transition. And how do you ensure that you make your building safe, as risk-free as possible for your employees, for your customers and contractors that are coming in to work on equipment, etc. So CABA's been doing a number of things in that area, and in addition to the regular research that we're doing. So I'm sure through the rest of this conversation, we'll touch on some of those things.
Yeah, Ron, well, you recently were membered to a very interesting panel, COVID-19 panel, to address exactly what you're talking about. It was Ron Zimmer, Dave Handwerk, Doug Palmer, and it was hosted by CompuTrol's Drew Meyer. You guys covered some really good stuff. Just give us kind of an overview of what you talked about there.
Yeah, so I was invited, and as we all know, there's not very many, if any, face-to-face events. That's a big change in our industry. So there's many more virtual events, whether they be conferences that are trying to do it on a virtual basis, and webinars. So a company that we know very well, CompuTrolls, invited and has been doing regular webinars. They invited me to join this panel, and it was quite illuminating. I learned actually a lot because there's some great end users like Heinz and others on there, and so we were sharing some of our research and information as well. But I think that's really key right now because for most organizations, there's no playbook that we can pull off the shelf and say, oh, we've got a worldwide pandemic. Yes, this is what we do exactly as a company, as an organization. So we're kind of creating a playbook as we learn. And what came out of that, of course, is that each jurisdiction, country, state, even local government, cities, will have different rules. And so what might be true in Arizona might be different in California or New York. So it's very important to understand what the local rules are. But there are some things that some guiding principles that that were shared on that webinar that we were trying to bring across, and I think it became very clear that there are some very specific things that companies can do, whether you're an OEM of hardware, software, a provider of technology, an integrator, or whether you are a builder, developer, facility manager, and what are the steps that you take. And that became clear that each building is very unique. I think one of the panelists used the term snowflake. They're all snowflakes, very different. And so you have to approach each one. You can't, well, there might be some universal guidelines that you can do across your portfolio if you're large, like CBRE or JLL and others. But quite frankly, you have to really approach each one very separately and develop a plan and then work that plan specifically to the building, its use, its history, the technologies in the building, and then what is it that you need to do to, I'll come back to this point over and over, how do you make that building as safe as possible, both for your employees and for your customers? Because ultimately, the way that we really want to reduce the risk, and we want to convey that message, and we want to make sure that people that come to that building understand the fact that you know, this is actually quite a safe environment, and all the steps that have been taken to, whether it's social distancing, reconfiguring of the office floor plan, new technology that's going into the building, like filtration systems, ultraviolet light, all of those things as a person going into the building, you say, you know what, I feel quite safe and I'm comfortable in coming back into this building.
Well, yeah, very well said. And you know, I was reading recent surveys that were given to the building owners, you know, because there's a natural order of, you know, reentry. The federal government or the government in Canada says, okay, this is what you got to do. You're shelter in place, and then they took it from red to yellow, and now we're in green in parts of where I live, Pennsylvania. And so the first governance was, you know, the federal, and then you have the building owner has his responsible or her responsibilities to make their building as safe as possible. Then you have the tenant who actually leases the building from the building owner. They have their part in this, but the person that is most important is the employee or the occupant. And so the survey said that the building owners, there was about 40% thought that they were able to provide that safe environment that you're talking about. The key was the occupant survey was that about 80% weren't so certain, that there was some hesitation and some reservations about really and truly going back into the building that they worked in with the confidence that the government, the leasee, everybody was looking out for their best interests. So again, it's a messaging thing, and it requires some of the stuff that you guys are doing is showing that leadership on how you can do it. Here's an inspection checklist. Here's some, you know, like you said, guiding principles, but each one of those facilities is going to be that snowflake that you referenced. It's going to have its own set of challenges, and it's going to have to tell its own story.
Right, and to that point, what I'd like to convey is that we have today so much great technology that has not been deployed, and I think you two gentlemen know this as well as anyone, that and not to say that intelligent buildings and the best technology is the be all and end all. I'm clear on that. There's some, you know, we have about 6.4 million commercial buildings in Canada, US, as an example, and a lot of, you know, the heritage and the history is that's existing building stock for the most part. There's some new buildings going up, like the McDonald's headquarters in Chicago, which JLL and Siemens technology. I mean, that's one of the most intelligent buildings now in the world. So we have some very iconic, great buildings that are coming up and going into place. And so for all kinds of reasons, you know, interoperability issues and cost perceptions, you know, we haven't seen the uptake in the intelligent building world as we maybe felt that it could, because now research is showing there's some real huge benefits. Even though we're doing a major piece of research right now on productivity, over $200,000, fully funded. Here's a tip for your readers or to your viewers, to say that we're looking for a building or buildings that we can actually use in our research. And this actually will touch on COVID, quite frankly. We're going to look back, and we truly believe that that if you have the indoor quality just perfect, you know, the oxygen, CO2, take the dust, the mold, the contaminants out. If you could actually get the lighting just perfect, the temperatures just perfect, and in open office concept, that's sometimes challenging. If you do all of that, you're actually going to achieve something that's truly magical. Your employees are going to become healthier. Their wellness is going to increase. Their productivity will increase. They'll have less sick days, less absenteeism, less complaints to the facility manager. So we have 14 great organizations. Research will be done by the National Research Council. Like I say, we're fully funded, over 200,000. All we need right now is a couple of buildings that we, typically office buildings, that we can actually then do the data analysis. Again, looking backward, not looking forward, for the last about 2 years. There's no cost. Anyone that participates, there's absolutely zero cost, a little bit of sweat equity from the HR people. And what's going to be really important is once we do this research, it'll be quite, we believe this is the first time that it'll be scientifically, objectively proven. There's been bits and pieces, Joseph Allen at Harvard has done some great research. Others, Carnegie Mellon, Lawrence Berkeley, there's some amazing different pieces. I saw one recently on lighting, which they just changed the lighting, had a 25% productivity gain. Can you imagine? Because the biggest cost, as we all know, is the people, the employees. That's 90% of the typical cost in an office building.
Right.
10% is the building cost. 1% is the energy cost. Not
Wow.
that energy is not important. I mean, if you can reduce your energy costs, obviously that's important. Anyway, so there's
Well,
a challenge to everybody.
Yeah, well, hang on, Ron. I want to back up real quick because it sounds to me like you're making a heck of an offer here to two lucky buildings or thereabout, right? So
Right.
that you guys will analyze their building based on data, backward data, and then make recommendations or insights and share insights. What criteria is it for somebody that you're looking for? Do they have to have a system in that's already got analytics? Or are you guys going to collect the data? How is that going to work?
Yeah, so Jennifer Veach, the scientist from NRC, there'll be a call and a discussion, obviously, to make sure the building qualifies. It doesn't have to be 100% intelligent, but obviously it's got to be moved from I'll say a dumb building to a retrofit, or like the McDonald's, they moved employees from buildings that were dumb and now into a very smart building, so we can analyze going backward what were the changes, like example sick leave and absenteeism. So those are things that we'll be looking for, and it's not a huge, all the data will be anonymized, so it's going to be very confidential, and we're going to release virtually 100% of their findings. So we're working with IFMA, International Facility Management Association. They have like 22,500 members worldwide. They're excited to say that, we'll be delighted to share this research. We'll work with the BOMAs, BOMA International, BOMA Canada, the BOMA cities. So basically try to share this with as many end users. And the reason for this is this will be not only important at any time, but now in the COVID-19 era, what can be very important for the group that gets involved is it would baseline as to what technology did for them at that point and show very objectively, the gains and the benefits. Then going forward, there's an opportunity to do a second piece to say, now in the COVID-19 era, what is it that we need to do, or maybe we're going to tweak it. Maybe we're going to put in air filtration systems that are of the highest level that you might see in hospitals or labs, airlines. There's some amazing filtration systems now that can actually remove very small particles and even viruses. So that's a possible outcome of what we're looking at. Ultraviolet light. Hospitals have been using ultraviolet light for many years, and one of our member companies, Legrand, has bought a company not that long ago. So good for them, because they have some great technology that they're one of our board members. They can actually put that into rooms, and with ultraviolet light, that is a great way to help kind of sterilize or to destroy germs, viruses. In fact, one of the pieces of research, I'm just going to make sure I have it correctly here. Allied Market Research says right now, if this is before COVID-19, ultraviolet light was about $1 billion industry. It's going to mushroom, and it's going to move to a $3.4 billion industry by 2026. I mean, there's an example of some existing technology that can be very usable. But we're going to look at things like coming into the play, like thermal imaging. How do we determine if, in fact, people have a higher temperature? It might not be unreasonable to assume that people coming into the building will have their temperature taken. which raises issue of privacy. Airlines are actually stating they're going to do that. So, and we've already heard of some groups saying, wait a minute, well, that's a privacy issue, and what are you going to do with that data? So there's cause and effect here. So we're going to move into some uncharted area in terms of how do we manage and monitor people in a building, right?
Right.
Absolutely. In fact, to your point on that, the whole thing, we had a webinar recently in a town hall where the first thing came up was HIPAA. You know, in other words, when you Eric and I were talking about offline there, the different testing and what does it mean and how does it last and you know what if you're a facility and you require everybody that comes in there to be tested and it has to be organized data? And if you don't want to be tested, that's fine. You can't come in, you know. But and then in other words, your issue or the things you just said about the privacy issues is so big. I can't wait to see how it's going to go, all the way to risk and liability for a building owner. I mean, let's say you take all these marvelous steps that we're talking about, the filtration, you know, the social distancing, the hand sanitation, the one-way in and out of the building, whatever, and somebody still comes up with you know, the old maid card and gets COVID-19.
Yeah.
Where are you, you know, where are your limits of risk and liability?
And you hit one that I raised, and we also did a panel on a recent CABA Intelligent Building Council meeting. We had some great players. Ken Sinclair, who you know, moderated. Thomas Shercliffe was engaged. Mark Pedock. So we had this great panel. We set a record, actually. We had over 300 and almost 300 people registered. We had 180 80 plus people that attended. That was a record for us. I think it was because it was the council meeting, not the panel, but I probably was the panel drew them in. But in any case, it was very illuminating, and clearly one of the things that that came up there, and I raised in the panel of ControlTalk, was that liability is a very real issue, so one of the, you know, coming back to every aspect of this ecosystem. So if you are a supplier of product and services, you know, what steps do you take to ensure that you are not only supplying what you say you're supplying and providing, you know, to the standards and levels that you are indicating, and number two, as a end user, if you're putting in new systems, um, what do you have to, number one, record that? So definitely bring your legal counsels together to ensure that you draft the most appropriate documents for that building. And because you're right, I mean, as an employee, what if I do get sick? And then I launch a lawsuit, right? So there's an issue that can be, or an employer, a customer coming in. So how do you then demonstrate that no, I took all the steps that were required? We actually believe that, whether, you know, ASHRAE, I'm sure, is working on some new standards and benchmarks. We believe that codes will change because of this, and that's probably a good thing, because codes can really help give direction to the industry, also protect the industry from litigation. So there's a number of things that have to take place or should take place, and we actually encourage all organizations to develop special task forces. So whether you're an end user, so you're it could be as big as, you know, JLL or CBRE or Cadillac Fairview is on our board of directors. So you develop a task force, and the Heinz actually have done that worldwide, and that's a smart thing. And bring in non-traditional people, not just your own people. Like bring in medical professionals, bring in architects, interior designers, and planners. So basically, to look at what your building is and what it needs to be going forward. I think that will make a major step. It'll also dictate probably the priorities, because budgets are going to be tight. So basically, there's maybe a pecking order or a priority list of things that you would want to do as you go forward. And some will be very low cost. and some might be a higher cost. So you'd kind of lay out the priorities or a strategic plan for that building, or for your product that you're providing, to say, here's the things that we can do, and to better protect
Right.
ourselves from litigation.
No, I liked it a lot, Ron, and I think that what what was occurring to me, and for our listeners out there who include owners, but also include consulting engineers, a lot of integrators, and people like that, is Kenny's great grandfather, Hanwad Wu Smyers used to say back in the old country in China, with great chaos comes great opportunity. So I think what you're really sort of providing to me is talking points for our core listeners to go in and as they talk to owners, because you're really identifying the concerns, and litigation is certainly one. And so many of our integrators have the ability to collect data points, data analytics, and things like that.
Right.
And the other thing that's telling is that focusing on the energy, although energy is important, even before COVID, focusing on productivity was those were conversations we were having.
Correct.
Now focusing on the possibility of liability and having the building be safer. And then how do you sort of get that out to the tenants in such a way that you leverage your building and your asset?
Absolutely. And just to add to that, one of the trends, and already the research is showing that this whole working from home phenomena, it's not going away. And in fact, the new normal, of course, the new normal will be until we get a vaccine or what they call herd immunity, the 60 to 70% of the population being infected. So, until we get to that point, once we get to the new normal, it's never going back. We're not going back. It's going to be a changed world, and that includes the built sector. So already we're seeing companies that are realizing that, actually there's a real benefit to having some or all of our employees. I think it's right now, when the research says literally 1%. So think 1% is a huge number in the context of all the buildings. Will actually not come back. They're going to keep their people home. Think of call centers now, how that's going to change. So there's a number of changes, and what does that mean to the sector? Well, maybe we don't need as much real estate. Maybe we'll be moving to less. A situation where we don't need as much square footage. What does it mean now as we moved into this era of open concept, teaming, hoteling, where we come together, we share desks, well, that's not going to happen. Can you imagine coming back and having somebody has to disinfect that whole desk because somebody else was just sitting at it, a few minutes ago. So there's a lot of changes that are going to take place that we're going to see. But I'll come back to what you said, Eric, that there is opportunity. I'll come back to something I said earlier. We have a lot of the technology today that's available, and so how does if you're an OEM of hardware, software, how can you actually position that to say, hey, we can help you? We can actually do a lot of things that you should be doing. In fact, by the way, this is what the state law says. This is what the government is saying you must do or should do, best practice and all those good things. And it'll help you in litigation and in helping show that your employees and your customers are feeling very safe coming back to your building. So there's a lot of things that we can do to help profile. And then I make a point to the OEMs, right? And even as you see, the integrators, the people that are involved in our industry that are frontline architects, engineering firms, to be able to actually be progressive, be very positive, be very forward and going forward and saying, hey, you may not realize this, but we've got something that can help you out here. We got some technology that can really help you, and you might want to take a look at it in this COVID-19 era. And I think that's important. I think the companies actually have to really revisit and take advantage of the products and services they have. Example, ultraviolet light. If that's something you have in your portfolio, you're a lighting company, wow, what a great opportunity. So secondly, how do you actually then review all of your portfolio? This is a great time to jetson those products that have been kind of on in your books and in your warehouse using up space, but not really the best sellers. Let's jetson that stuff and let's actually put our R&D to work. Let's really become progressive and understand how we can make the best air filtration systems in the world, and not market just in North America, but market around the world. So that's a real opportunity.
Well, Ron, real quick, Kenny, just getting back to this whole legal thing, because that might be a new trend. Because the first case that gets against a building owner that they didn't take the steps for COVID, that first win, then where does that stop? I mean, so is COVID today, and then anybody that gets sick in a building? I mean, is that just going to really put pressure on the building owners to your point, Ron, have all kinds of steps in place, doing due diligence and so on and so forth, and be able to document and prove it? Because I think if one COVID case wins, then I think the lawyers are coming out with any illness you get in the building, they're going to try to make the building owner liable. You guys think that's a possibility?
I do, and that's coming back to my point that I believe that there's we in our industry should get ahead of that. We should actually be very progressive, both just individually with our buildings and for the right reasons. We need to show, if we want this economy to really hum, as lots of people, everybody wants the economy to really get back in gear, what better way to show your employees, your customers, the people that come into your building, and it could be integrators, that are dealing with, new technology going in or servicing your existing technology. So there's all kinds of things that we could do. Elevators. I mean, why do we have to touch elevator buttons? Can we not use voice recognition? I mean, there's many things that I think that we have to become innovative, creative, and take advantage and be on the forefront of what we can do, and be world leaders, quite frankly. And to that point, we can learn. The way COVID-19 spread throughout the world, we actually had, as you know, many countries were they're ahead of us in a bad way. They had to experience the pain before North America. So let's learn, like, what is Germany doing? What's South Korea doing? Or Shanghai? What are the buildings doing there? And we can learn from the best practices and understanding of what worked, what didn't work. So I think there's a real opportunity here to not just try to do this as they create this somebody used the term, I think, one of the panels, you're trying to, I think it was Mark actually said, you're trying to fix the plane or build it in the air. So the point being that I think there's a lot that we can learn and we can then implement, which will then do many positives for that particular company, whether you're developing a product and delivering it and services, as well as the building itself.
Well, Ron, I want to circle back to some of the things you said, because again, this is a marvelous conversation and very enlightening, and I really appreciate and enjoy your delivery of it, because I believe in the positive message too, and I think that's what you're saying, is that while this is a challenging situation, there's a great opportunity. I think codes are going to be the primary the first line of defense against liability and risk. We had to come up with new codes, like you said. ASHRAE has its special task force that's launched. The ASHE people, the American Society of Healthcare Engineers, they've launched a very high-powered initiative to get everything. But it all boils down to the basics. One of the most amazing things I've learned through some of the recent engagements we've had is that it all comes down to temperature, humidity, and pressure. Mm-hmm. How important it is to control those and control them accurately. How important filtration, ventilation, and dilution is. Now, it's all about air. ASHRAE's two biggest takeaways that they keep pushing is dilution. That means more air changes, more fresh air, and evacuating the old air. Close off the return ducts, run your AC and everything, or run your system 24/7. Air movement, dilution, and then the filtration. And like you said, filtration has been kind of a laughable thing, because we sell DP switches that click, make a circuit that say it's time to change the filters, because it's been such a afterthought in terms of building maintenance and whatever. But I think we're going to see as an emphasis on actually bringing your equipment up to optimal standards, so that you can provide that additional air And you're so right. There is some new technologies, thermal cameras. They can do people counting at the
Yeah,
same time.
people
One of the
counting.
biggest
Yeah,
measures is that you've got to limit the number of people. You know, your
right.
administration protocols is your reduction of visitors or no visitors. You limit your staff to essential only until you get more, better control of it. So the Steelers just announced, the Pittsburgh Steelers football team announced this morning that they are going forward with the 2020 season, but the seating is only going to be half the seats will be full to maintain the social distancing as a negotiation somewhere with either the state or, and I don't know how they do it. They're going to let half the people in the stadium at the time.
Yeah.
And then enforce all those, PPE, personal protection equipment. Everybody's gonna have a mask, and you're gonna have to sit, 1 seat apart from each other. So it's
Mhm.
just we're going to deal with this. We're going to cope with it. And I believe that positive messaging that you came away with, the way you were saying that, let's show leadership, but it's basically attacking the basics back to remote monitoring. I mean, we have
Yep.
so many buildings out there that don't have any remote monitoring. Imagine how
Mm.
easy this is to put your system in there and then have alarms. And then more importantly, the archives, that you've taken that reasonable man measure to protect your building or protect your occupants of your building, whether they're the employees or whether they're the customers. So again, these are all doable things, and then the access control. I mean, access control is going to go into center stage,
Right.
because it all begins with closing down all the entries into your building, bringing them into a primary entry control point where you can enforce the PPE requirements. So you can
Mhm.
enforce the people counting. You can have hand sanitation, mask, facial covering enforcement.
Mhm.
And but it all comes down to real basic, doable things. So that I think that's where the code's. And the last thing that is remarkable, what you said about the snowflake. I mean, that's a wonderful analogy because it's so true. We've been exposed to going to hospitals,
Mhm.
food stores, post offices, things that had to stay open, and each one was a different location that you had to adapt to.
Yes.
But it was doable. So my biggest my great takeaway from our conversation is that we have the ability to fix a lot of this now. It's just an enlightening process in leadership.
And yeah, you've touched on many other great points that are doable and achievable, and in fact, an opportunity for our industry. We've we've worked hard to actually encourage particularly end users to say, here's some great technology, and just imagine those companies that actually did. And there are some amazing leaders that we have in our industry called end users that truly get it and have been upgrading their buildings in so many different ways. But just imagine through this whole process, if you had remote control, like if you had data analytics, if you had digital twins, what a great advantage that was for those buildings and those companies, that whether it was owner operated or rental buildings and facility managers. I mean, that was a huge benefit. So I mean, there's a great example of how the technology, and it's going to grow. We just to share another piece of research that we just saw recently. Monder Intelligence said our intelligent building technology is going to continue now at a rapid pace of 23% compound annual growth for the next 4 years. That's amazing growth. So, I mean, that's a very positive indicator that the technology we have is going to grow phenomenally. And it's also going to extend, as you know, we cover all buildings, industrial, connected homes, and the connected home sector as well. I mean, what a transition, the home office phenomena just exploded. And the nice thing is that our technology, our networks, the all the telcos and cable cos and the providers, the Ciscos and others have been amazing,
It works.
and we actually were able
Yeah.
to really cope with a major transition. But the IDC research, I'll share this piece of research, and they're saying that by 2025, which isn't that far away, they fully expect we're going to see something like 41.6 billion devices, connected IoT devices. So there's going to be a continual explosion of interconnectivity, and IoT will be front and center, of course, to make this all happen. So coming back, we're not going back. What we had as the normal is never really coming back. We're going to see a different transition. Certainly, till we get this virus under control, and then once it's under control, we'll be much better prepared, certainly for future pandemics that might come at us. But increasingly, I think there's an opportunity here for our industry to say, "Hey, um, it's not a good situation, but we have a lot of great technology that we can actually now bring forward and show how it can really help companies in this terrible situation that we're in."
Right, right. Well, Ron, listen, I know our audience has got to be asking, this is such great information. How do I get more from CABA? I think
Yeah.
you guys got a new journal that just came out. Would you speak about that? And then people that want to get updates or want to participate in CABA, could you walk us through how to do that?
Absolutely, and so CABA. One of the things that we've always done as an industry association, we have been set up as a knowledge center, as a way of providing some of the best research information and contacts people. So a lot of it's free. I always say go to www.caba.org and just take advantage of all the free information that's available to you in our news brief, our library, the white papers that we've been doing complimentary to our CABA members. Some amazing information there. So there's a lot of free information. The second thing, obviously, if companies join, they get much more in terms of the member library, more current research. The research itself that we do, uh, our board of directors makes the final selection, but we're doing an intelligent buildings energy management systems. We already have 14 organizations signed up to it. There's opportunity for others to join. This will actually touch on COVID-19, absolutely. So opportunity for companies to engage. In fact, we have now the lowest price at 1,000 companies can be involved. So it's not a huge cost. Harbor Research will do that. We're also doing one on connected homes, which will touch on this as well. It's focused on privacy and cybersecurity in the connected home. And again, what we discovered, research is showing, is that unfortunately, we have some bad people out there, cyber criminals, who will take advantage of people, elderly, and people who are not maybe as aware of things like malware and ransomware. So we and basically to steal identity. So we really need to. In fact, I don't know if you know this, but the number one and two reason why people don't buy connected home devices is actually concern over privacy and cybersecurity.
Sure.
So again, as an industry, that's why we're doing the research. We need to show that this is either perceived, in some cases it's perceived, some cases it's real. So ultimately, we're doing this deep dive of research into that area. But again, there's a number of research pieces that we're doing. We've done some amazing research like monetization of intelligent buildings and others over the years that is still available to purchase or is free. So we encourage the industry to really take advantage of, knowledge is priceless. And the nice thing, as both of you know, even through what you're doing here, is how do you share that? And we really want to make an effort as part of our mandate is to share as much of it as we can and to further, and that whole degree, we're only 1 degree separation from many other people. We would encourage people that see something, and even on our LinkedIn group, our YouTube channel, our Twitter feed, to really spread that information out to others in the industry.
Well, Ron, I got to tell you, what you do is very much appreciated. Our guest this week is Controltrends Hall of Famer, Ron Zimmer. CABA.org. I encourage our audience, check it out. If you haven't gone to his website yet, you need to. And $1,000 for that membership, Ron, that's a steal. So anything else, Kenny, before we let Ron hop off?
No, I just congratulations. The CABA Journal, I think, is going to be I know I get my emails and I appreciate them. That's, again, you're only as good as your current information. And I think currency is very important in terms of every week is COVID-19. There's new things coming out. There's new studies. There's new information, and somebody has to busy themselves to do it. And having a
Right.
consolidated place to get that's very important. So
Ron, and just so you know, now Kenny he's brilliant with these quotes. There's no accident here. You caught. He said that currency is the new current. Currency is the new currency, right? So being current is the new currency.
But
so
actually,
Ken, well
being
done.
current is the new currency.
Yeah, and in
being
fact,
current is a new currency.
I love it. You got to trademark that. They one of the things, and I was remiss in saying, we just launched the CABA Journal, It's a fancy name for a new blog, but basically it's, and the first one actually I wrote focused on some of the things we talked about here. And we'll have guests. Actually, we wanted it's weekly. In fact, you probably know Chris Larry from EXP. Chris Larry has done the second one. Dr. Ken Wax is going to be doing one. So basically, as an invitation to all your listeners, if they have interest in being a guest, there's no cost to be a guest writer in our blog series or our journal. We'd be delighted to have them contact our office, myself, Zimmer at CABA.org, and we'll be delighted to work with you and your organization to have you included. And again, another way that we can, on a more regular basis, get solid information out to the industry. So we do that. And actually, the research, our membership actually starts at $850, which is incredibly, when it's tax deductible. But the research project is actually the lowest level is $1,000. So clearly, again, I know money's tight, but if that's of interest, we'd be delighted. But again, there's so much that's at no cost. That's the best deal going.
Yeah, no, I think it is, Ron. Well, listen, again, Ron Zimmer, CABA.org. Thanks for all you do, brother.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, Ron.
Kenny, man, great stuff with Ron Zimmer, and man, he's been very gracious with us. Tell our audience what's going on.
Oh yeah, well, Ron's he's been very he understands what we're doing at Controltrends, and he's made us official. We have reciprocity. So Controltrends has a certificate of membership that CABA has awarded us, so that we're very grateful for that. And
very proud of that.
Gives us, it gives us some of that. What we try to put into Controltrends is media and important information. So we have content. CABA's content is some of the best content in the industry. So guys, Ron made it available. It's no charge for a lot of information. Sign on for CABA.org, and you get a great email. And I think the journal is being sent out too, weekly now. Yeah. And for people like Ken St. Clair, all these great minds out there, contribute to CABA, and you'll get some really good exposure for yourself and your ideas.
Yeah, Ron's very, very much appreciated. Well, Kenny, I want to segue a little bit here because, I fully get that we're going to annihilate all these friggin' germs in the buildings, right? I mean, we're talking about with all the stuff we kill, but, I wonder if an unintended consequence to that is we're going to, in the long run, weaken our immune systems. I mean, if you think about part of what happens, we get exposed to germs, our body's systems develop immunity to it. I'm just a little worried if we kill all the germs, if we're not going to, in the long run, weaken our immune systems.
Well, again, I'm not a doctor and I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah, well, hang on real quick, because we have been talking about lawyers. Anything Kenny and I say, please consult a professional on this, a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever. We in no way, shape, or form acknowledge that we know what the heck we're talking about. Okay, so this is purely for entertainment purposes.
So it's a great disclaimer, because you're right. This litigious society.
Litigious.
Yeah, whatever. You know what I mean. sue the hell out of each other, But the bottom line is that we have talked dimensionally about what COVID-19 has done inside and outside, whether it's our personal lives, our home lives, our business lives, our neighborhood lives, our community lives, our city lives, our state lives. Everybody's got a different story. That snowflake thing is really, I got a great image of a snowflake now, because everybody has to come to terms with this and have to make it work and take the steps necessary to get back into high gear, wherever that is. One of the webinars I was on last week, it said it's going to be 2023 before we get back to 2019. Where we were before COVID started in end of February, it's going to take 2 years and a quarter for us to get back to being close to that economically and get the engines running. And so growth is another year beyond that. But what do you do with liability, Eric? What's your thoughts? I mean, so you want to do everything right. You do everything you can to the best of your ability. There are no codes that really address COVID-19 other than the protocols each state and each community locally is putting out for people. But the professionals we have, our contractor, our brethren, our suppliers, our vendors, I mean, where is the safe ground? How do you tell everybody that you enter at your own risk? I mean,
well, I kind of think that, and this is where it gets really interesting, because as Ron Zimmer was pointing out, I mean, people might be coming into buildings less, so square footage might be, if you're a real estate owner, you want to do everything you can to encourage people into the buildings, but it's like, are we going to have to sign disclaimers to go into buildings? That
Well,
you're in at your own risk type thing.
to me, I remember one of the classes I took in my younger days was the term was caveat emptor, buyer beware. And I remember writing a paper about a baseball ticket. I took a baseball ticket, and you read the small print on the back of it, and basically it tells you where it disclaims if you go into that baseball stadium and you get hit with a foul ball, it's your problem, not ours.
Yeah.
You entered at your own risk, and of course that always gets challenged. We had a very unfortunate experience. We gave tickets away. One of our customers, and his wife lost her front teeth on a foul ball. The guy in front of her acted like he was going to catch it and didn't, and she got hit with the face with the ball. And I just felt so that's why it always reminds me, every time I hear these situations. In other words, I think though there's a reasonable man, and I really think that again, I've seen so many guys and women that are in positions of responsibility really come to the plate, ready to take care of it, ready to address it, not run from it, not hide from it, not ignore it, but meet it out front, say, what can we do? And this is our budget. This is the realities that we have. Let's get started. Let's find these protocols. Let's comply with them. But I think, the code people, the people that set, the task force that ASHRAE has forth, I think they got 120 of the smartest minds in this business. They're going to start putting out more information. There's some great webinars and seminars coming out. And again, it gets down to the basics. Some of the things we said in our discussion with Ron is that this isn't black magic. This is stuff we can do. This is
this is on our wheelhouse, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not even complicated. It's in our wheelhouse. So I think this is going to be really good for our industry, specifically the HVAC side and the analytics side and the building automation. So it's good
remote
stuff
monitoring.
there.
You got to get it. It doesn't cost that much anymore.
So listen, so I went back out, ventured out in the world this week. Okay. And I did this for a couple reasons. And this sort of ties into what we're talking about. For those of you who don't know, that I, for funs and giggles, go to a place called cryotherapy and get in a cryotherapy chamber and go like 150 degrees below zero for 3 minutes, just for the heck of it, right? And I've been doing that for years. But obviously with COVID-19, haven't ventured out to do that. And I also go to, different places to get fruit and stuff like that. But my daughter had a test, my oldest daughter, Britt, and she basically came out with something called an antigen. It said that she had COVID-19 and that she had this, her system was able to be immune to it now, right? And, there's been a lot of controversy about this, and this is my big reveal. And again, don't take my word for it. This is for entertainment and conversational purposes only. But my wife's brother works for one of the big universities doing research, and we hadn't let our daughter be around us because she's around other people, and without social distancing and a mask and all that. And she said, "Look, they've asked me to donate blood because I've got this, immunity thing." So she's been donating blood, but her brother tells her that they've been doing research on this, and he's going, "Look, the next couple of weeks it's going to be out, but bottom line, if you've had it, like she has, and you test positive for this, you've got at least," what they're debating that hadn't come out yet, is that you get at least 2 years of immunity from this, most likely a lifetime immunity of it. Your system will be a lifetime. So they're trying to get the fine print on it, but I think that's going to get released. Okay. So this prompts me because I don't know, you remember, Kenny, for February, I was out for 3 weeks. I was sick as a dog, right? I couldn't get out of bed, and I just thought it was the flu. And so I make an appointment to go get my blood tested to see if I've got this antibody, right? And it winds up being Quest Labs, which is in a hospital. And so immediately, I'm in this thrust in this thing. And so you walk into the space. The first thing they do is they take your temperature, and then they ask you a series of questions. And if you're okay, they put the little tag on you, you're okay. And then you've got to wear the mask, you go through it. So I got the test. So I get to see this first thing because there's a ton of people around there. So that's the scariest I've been. The second thing I do is I go into my cryotherapy place. Now I can't just walk in. Now I have to make an appointment. When I walk in, the first thing they do, they've got masks. They shoot me on the forehead or in the ear to check my temperature. If the temperature is good, then they, basically put sanitizer on my hands. They put plastic gloves on, and then they put the gloves you go in on. In the dressing room now, there's nothing in there. They give me a robe to put on. So what I'm saying is that they've taken these steps to eliminate the possibility of me getting infected or infected them. And then as soon as I leave that dressing room, I have to take all my stuff out, put it in a bin, and then they wash all those, and then they sanitize the room, right? So it's just an example of things getting back to normal with, more process-based precautions on their standpoint. That makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. And to get back to what you said about, could we possibly, if we have all these purifications and we do a really good job, we kill all the bacteria and the viruses, are we going to affect our immune system? And I would say, it's never going to stop. I mean, the virus thing, the things that, I get remarkable, that we get flu shots every year, and those flu shots can only address the flu shots that were last year's issue. So they learned what the virus is all about, and they make this year's flu shots for last year's flu with no idea what this year's flu is going to be like. So I mean, it's just it's iteration after iteration. They're all viruses and they're all similar, but they're all different. So no, we're going to have to play this cat and mouse game with the immune system forever, Eric. I think it's all part. As long as we're alive and we're not roboticized or whatever, as long as we're living organisms, we will always be challenged by viruses and bacteria, and we will always do. The body has an amazing ability to adapt and evolve and meet those new challenges with the help of medicines. But I don't think medicines will ever permanently cripple our immune system from evolving.
Good. Well, the other thing I did, this was another interesting thing, and I'd be interested to know any of our listeners out there who know nurses that work in hospitals and all. Because, if you remember, George, about 3 weeks ago, the guy just basically started reopening things and took a lot of criticism for it, right? And so the other thing I do is I go to this place called VitaFlow. You remember we did it in Vegas, Kenny, where they basically give you the IV bag with all kinds of good stuff for you, nutrients and stuff like that. And, I've done that on a regular basis. I haven't been in there since the end of February because, again, of COVID. So, but I know most of the girls that work there that do the IVs, it's a part-time job. They work at hospitals, and this is just where they pick up some extra income. So I've gotten to know several of them really, really well. Here's what I found fascinating. I went in there yesterday, and again, they take the temperature, you do the mask, taking the precautions. And I was asking a couple of these nurses, what's going on at the hospitals? I mean, you guys got to be slammed, you got to be packed. And they're going, there's nobody there with COVID. We got all these COVID, facilities. We've had to lay some people off. Nobody's coming in with COVID-19, which I thought was just really peculiar. And I'd be interested, again, if you are a nurse or know nurses, reach out in comments, let us know if you're seeing that trend too. And I think, Kenny, one of the conversations you and I have had, and I have with other people, is we're just so exasperated with the media and our politicians. Just what are the facts? What's really going on? But when I hear something like that, and it just makes me, I don't want to be insensitive to the fact that this is a pandemic, but what's really going on here?
I could give you my 2 cents worth. And I was recently in a hospital, and I felt the same way. It was very, very empty. And I think it had to do with a couple of things. One is when you deal with these things, you're dealing with worst case scenarios. The whole idea was to keep the hospitals as empty as possible in the event you had an emergency and you had a surge of a whole lot of sick people. I think as time goes on, and we're finding out that a vast number and highest percentage of people that were affected were over a certain age, and they were in certain locations like nursing homes and old age facilities and care facilities. So that we may have grabbed the wrong end of that stick. We should have quarantined all the nursing homes and kept all the people that work there in place and let the vibrance of a city continue to do that herd immunity. So again, this is a learning process, and I don't think anybody's really guilty or not. And I hope to gosh it wouldn't be anything political where there's some kind of a ulterior motive or conspiracy thing going.
Well, no. I don't think that for a minute. I think what's happened is just become a political ping pong ball, and it's people horrible. Are just I think they're posturing to try to get political.
No, I can't even stand listening to there's no channel that is a sanctuary for to get the information. I think you got to work hard. You got to go to the internet sites. You've got to talk to intelligent people to do a lot of reading, and people that want to go talk politics first about this thing. I really don't think they're listening to anything. I think they march off the cliff. They march off the cliff.
Right. Well, when to your point, there's a saying, hindsight's 20/20, right? Always 20/20, and I think you're right about that, because if Anna's brother is right, and we're going to find out that, in small doses, your system, if you get exposed to it, then your system develops immunity to it, then, that would totally support the theorem you just had that, hey, we need to take the people at high risk, quarantine them, and let everybody else sort of get their dose of it and deal with it, right? And
yeah, I think that's what again, I have a couple of friends that really they work hard to know it, and they're in the medical profession. And the truth is that nobody knows. I mean,
right.
one of the seminars I was on with the ionization is an amazing product, and we're real interested and anxious for it. But the reality was, somebody asked him, "Will that kill COVID-19?" He says, "I don't know."
Yeah.
How do I know? I mean, who knows? I mean,
Yeah.
it kills viruses for sure, and it
Right.
may kill COVID-19, but we don't know. We need to learn from the empirical information that we're all going to share here in the very near future. Does it work, or whatever, or what's the
Right.
most effective means?
Well, and listen, Kenny, just to put it in perspective, and we'll hop off of this topic, is that where you used to live, North Dakota, I saw a report on that they've had a 50% increase in COVID cases in North Dakota. Did you know
Well,
that?
well, no, but I mean, there's a metric issue with numbers. I mean, there's only
Right. No,
800,000
but
people
when
in
you
North
read the
Dakota.
fine print, it went from 2 to 3 cases.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because I remember I was in law enforcement once upon a time. I did I was taking courses in North Dakota, and we had community involvement. They let us ride along and everything, and they had like you said, a 50% increase in homicides in 2 people instead of
Yeah.
1 people, and they all happen on New Year's Eve. And it's normally a drunken debacle where one everybody has a gun, so just somebody lost their temper and shot at the other one and missed, and the other one didn't miss. It was like
well, yeah, no, I think to your point, you have to remember that the media is in business to make money, and the way they get money is putting eyeballs on their TV channel or reading their blogs or whatever. And so, I mean, there's let's come up with the best headline and keep people as hooked as possible.
Well, the best thing. Who was that? Now you know the rest of the story. Who was? You remember
Paul
who that
Harvey?
was? Paul Harvey. Well done. He said that he starts off a show one time. He's reading the front page. He goes, "Oh, just a terrible, terrible day last night. Fire burnt down 2 city blocks. There was a hit and run, and there was a robbery. There's an drug bust, whatever." And he said, just front page bleeds. What bleeds leads. That paper was from 1930. He read it like 10 years ago, I remember, and he goes, "That's the headlines from 1930."
Wow.
He said, "There's not a good statement or article, positive article in here until page 4, and where somebody saved somebody's life, or one of the first responders got there in time to prevent, or helped a woman who was having her baby on a bus or whatever." I mean, that's not on the front page. That's back deep in wedged into advertisements.
Do you remember Ted Turner?
Sure.
Guy found CNN and all that. He had a theory. He created a news channel called The Good News, and they reported nothing but the good news. And his theory was that 99% of what happens is good news. So rather than to go the negative, and it lasted, I think, less than a year. So what does that say about us? That
Hey, listen, we're probably all guilty of it. So here we can't sound oh high and mighty, but it's true. And to a certain point, it makes sense, because you're always interested in good news, but and no news is good news nowadays. I mean, no news is good news. We all know that from projects and whatever. If everything seems to be going right, the phone's not ringing, that's a good day. But yeah, I think so that, and I appreciate a lot of work you do. You do a lot of reading too, and sharing information. Maybe Controltrends community can respond back to that question you're saying, and some of those things about immunity or whatever. I don't know if that's the form that we want to maintain.
Yeah, well, no, I'm just curious. I just find, and it might be a one-off, it might be an anomaly, but I'd heard a lot of that. And you had one explanation, which is, well, you keep them empty. But again, I said, well, how many COVID cases you're seeing? We're not seeing any COVID cases.
Well, I think I don't know if it's the right thing or not. One thing I can say is I don't know, and I'm like a pendulum.
I'm
one
saying
day,
that too.
I'm like, this is all, what's going on here? I don't think it's as bad as everything. Next day, I'm thinking I'm not leaving the house. I wear my mask. I'm very tentative to those protocols, and I think somewhere in the middle is where we need to be. And there's nothing wrong with going through the governance procedure, the natural order of governance that started at the federal government. It said you stay home for a while so we flatten this curve. And then as it took a local governance, it's a natural procession of, a natural order of governance to the building you go into. And what we're going to see is that we talked a little bit about it, is you're going to have a privacy issue, data issue, and, HIPAA issues. We're going to have issues that, we were on the HIPAA site recently, and they said, you better come back next week. This is what we got this week for you. These are the precedent cases. These are our thoughts. You obviously have every obligation. You just have more obligations to treat things correctly. You have to protect people's privacy. They have a right to privacy. But then again, if they assent in any way, shape, or form and use their phones and they have IP devices, the people that manufacture these things are going to say, we're taking full advantage of whatever autonomous data is here for our benefit and your benefit. And so there's going to be a trade-off of the scale between privacy and health. The greatest good for the greatest numbers. So I think it's a learning process. It's not going to get old either.
Right.
But one of the good sites was HHS.government, United States Department of Health and Human Services, regarding those critical things we're talking about data, HIPAA, and the guidance that they're giving. That's where you have to have somebody dedicated, pretty much focusing on how you're going to deal with that. And there's open, there's sources there to provide guidance on covered health care providers' restrictions to media access to protected health information about individuals in their facilities. So that's our, and that was May 5th. So I'd welcome, or I'd invite everybody in the Controltrends community that wanted to learn more about that to get into that site. It's
Can you put the link in the show notes, Kenny?
Sure.
Let's put the link in the show notes.
Sure.
And seems like, were you telling me about there's a webinar or something coming up that deals with the legal
there's a
issues?
contract killer clauses considering COVID-19. We all want to be up to date on where things are at, but there's a big concern about, the webinar is for now that the coronavirus is a foreseeable risk and therefore not a force majeure event for new contracts. A foreseeable risk, meaning that if you don't do something right or you don't comply with protocols, you had a chance to do that. Now you have a reasonable man approach for it. So not a force majeure event. And the way I understand that is that, you had no control over it and it happened. It was beyond your.
It was an act of God.
Right. So these are the things that, I think you have to lend an ear to that. You have to read and focus on it. You have to have somebody who's looking out for your organization's best interest, because it's talking about contractors, insurance providers, engineers, construction managers, design builders, architects, subcontractors, lawyers, owners. So there's a requirement. And that's why I think what we do, what you do in your day-to-day work, what I do in my day-to-day work is so important, because there are things we can do. It's not beyond it's not a dream thing. This is things that you do. Close down the doors, have a central entry point, make sure that people come in there don't have high temperatures. If they don't want to comply, they can't come in. Now, what do you do if somebody flies halfway across the country to go to an event and you get them in a high temperature and you don't let them in? They paid $500 to go attend your event. Where's your coverage? How do you? So we need some guidance, and it's going to come from the federal government.
I tell you what, I'm going to add a whole other group that's going to benefit from this, which is the lawyers, right? This is, it's going to be interesting to see how that shapes out. But to your point, Ken, your great grandfather, Bruce Lee Smyers over in China, with great chaos comes great opportunities. And I really think that our industry, this could be really good.
It is.
Meaning we are at the heart of being able to provide some of this information.
This is a huge win in the HVAC sales. And again, I use that. You see how I use sales? Like
you did
the boat sales, but also the sales. SALES.
Dude, man, you as phonological ambiguity, Ken Smyers.
I think we're just about out of time.
You like that word, phonological ambiguity?
I don't even know what that is. What is that? Phonological.
Just what you said. It's a word that you say that has more than one meaning. Sales and sales. Used to use that in hypnosis a lot. They'll use it, But it's like, do you need to know now? Now, I'm not going to suggest that you go to sleep. No, but with that, Kenny Smyers.
I just want to go back on that HIPAA thing. The one I made reference to the issue guidance on covered healthcare providers, restriction on media access. That had nothing to do really with the facilities from our standpoint. That was from news crews going into hospitals and filming people that were COVID-19. So I'm just saying, but it's a daily or a weekly post or whatever. So. Gesundheit.
Well, thank you, Kenny Smyers. Well, listen, with that, a special thanks to our sponsor this week, Platinum Plus sponsor, EasyIO. They call it easy for a reason. The Beast from the East is now part of the Johnson Controls portfolio. They still got Gina Elliott, who rocks and rolls in the team. Hopefully Mike Marston and Lim Hoon Chat are enjoying their new life after EasyIO.
No, Lim's still very much engaged. Lim's
Is he?
doing
Okay.
Yeah, he did a couple webinars. He's doing another one coming up. Now, Michael Motorcycle, I don't know what he's up to. I think
Right. Well, Michael, whatever island you're on, Kenny, I'd like to come visit sometime. And then a special thanks to our guest this week, Ron Zimmer from CABA.org, CABA.org. Great stuff from Ron. And with that, Kenny Smyers, man, I'm going to put my mask on. I'm going to go outside. I'm going to go get in a 150 degrees below Fahrenheit. I'm going to get another IV, and I don't know what else I'll do today. But remember, be bold, stay in control, stay relevant, and go pick a flower today.
Indeed, Eric.
Indeed, Kenny Smyers.
Sit down, be quiet. They usually say